Welcome back to This Week in Film. It's the weekly podcast where we get together and talk about the movies we've seen over the past 7 days. I'm Nick Pananto, joined as always by Midwest Matt Lauer. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've seen one good movie and one terrible movie.
Oh, it sounds like an average week then.
Yeah.
I saw 2 good movies.
Huh?
Oh, wait. Yeah, I saw a good movie and a kind of good movie.
Okay.
All right. Maybe we should tell people what they actually are.
Nope, let's leave them in suspense.
I'm sure they'll just wait eagerly throughout going, what is it going to be?
So I watched, I'm sticking with my journey through 1400s England. I watched Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because I hate myself.
Good job.
And,
should.
And
Put yourself through that.
And then I watched Outlaw King, which is kind of a sequel to Braveheart. That's on Netflix. It's like a Netflix movie. Yeah.
Oh, wait, is that with Chris Pine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of it. That's about it.
Yeah, it was, I'll talk about it.
Cool.
And what did you see?
I saw Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, really?
And Vice.
Oh, okay.
The Dick Cheney movie.
I'm going to keep talking higher.
All right. No, I'm going to go low.
Okay. I'll start.
Cool.
With Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves from 1991, directed by Kevin. Oh, it wasn't directed by Kevin Costner. I thought this was. This was directed by Kevin Reynolds, starring the terrible Kevin Costner.
I think there's some speculation on that. However, that Kevin Reynolds is some sort of fake name for Kevin Costner.
Really?
I've heard that joke. I don't know how seriously to take it, and I'm not researching anything. So,
okay. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. He's terrible in this movie. This is like top 5 terrible Kevin Costner movies. Now, I can't stand Kevin Costner. I think he's just the worst.
Yeah.
And in this movie is no exception. He's not playing baseball, which is already a bad place for him to be, because I only like movies with Kevin Costner where he's playing baseball. And in this movie, he plays the character Robin Hood, an English guy who comes back from like the Crusades to find that Sheriff John, played by Alan Rickman, who is wonderful in this movie, has like taken over the town that they all live in or something. And Morgan Freeman is his buddy, and Christian Slater's in this movie. Maid Marian is played by Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
Master Antonio.
Yeah, Master Antonio. And I said Alan Rickman and Morgan Freeman, and that's really about it. There's some other people in it too. I hated this movie. I hated it. Kevin Costner doesn't even try, like, at all for an English accent. Christian Slater.
I think there are moments where he tries a little and it's bad.
I don't think he did. Christian Slater has an accent for about half the movie, and then he gives up.
That's who I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, like the beginning of the movie, he's like, "What's that, Robin?" And you're like, "All right, at least he's trying." And then like later in the movie, he's just Christian Slater yelling at people. Yeah, this movie's terrible. This movie has a 6.9 on IMDb.
Yeah, I think we need to stop trusting the IMDb reviews.
This movie's just so bad. So it's the story of Robin Hood. If you don't know, Robin Hood robs from the rich and he gives to the poor. Sheriff John, there's no prince John in this, like from the Disney cartoon. It's just like the sheriff of Nottingham is like consolidating his power, trying to become king, while the actual king is fighting in the Crusades. And spoiler alert, the king is Sean Connery. Sean Connery shows up for 10 seconds at the end of this movie, and he's like, "Hello, I'm King Richard."
He's like, what am I doing in this movie?
I'm going to put on all this. It's like I was on the set one day and decided to just walk on. I'm the king.
That's a terrible Sean Connery.
All I heard you say was spot on, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. My Sean Connery turns into Bane, yeah.
Yeah.
Darkness. We have a running joke at work where in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it's Bane as Sean Connery. Junior, they got us. It's funny at work.
Sounds good. Hey, just to do a course correction here, I brought up Kevin Reynolds on the IMDb, whose ratings we won't trust, but as far as their filmography, why not? Looks like he did a couple things with Kevin Costner. He directed Waterworld as well. But he's also got credit for movies that have nothing to do with Kevin Costner, like Tristan and Isolde and Risen and 187, which was a terrible movie, if I remember right. So yeah, he's actually a person, it seems.
Okay. Kevin Reynolds,
Mystery
real person.
solved.
Okay.
Right.
So back to Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
This movie features some Kevin Costner butt. You get to see his bare ass while he swims at one point. So, yay. I got to see that.
And that's the highlight of the movie. Hey, wait a minute. No, it's not. Alan Rickman's in this movie.
Alan Rickman is the highlight of this movie. Alan Rickman knows he's in a bad movie. And he is just straight up chewing the scenery. But anyway, back to naked Kevin Costner. He
okay, it's the highlight of the movie for Nick.
So there's this scene where Maid Marian like comes in contact with the Lost Boys, or not the Lost Boys. That's Peter Pan. With the let's just call them the Lost Boys.
Sure, why not?
And she's like, "You take me to Robin Hood right now," and whoever it is like, "Well, he doesn't know you're coming. This is embarrassing for him." And he takes him to the beautiful waterfall pool that Kevin Costner is swimming in.
Lord, you are just editing this movie like crazy.
It would be better way better with Robin Williams as Robin Hood. And so Robin Hood,
the Lost Boys from the Lost Boys.
Robin Hood
is a vampire movie.
Is just bathing in this waterfall pool, and then they show him like get out of the water, and he's like got a cross underneath the waterfall, and Kevin Costner looks terrified to be doing this. Like he's like pressed up against the wall, and he's like scooching to the left, and his bare ass is out, and it's just like, why is this part in the movie? We didn't need to see naked Kevin Costner.
I think back then maybe people wanted to.
I guess. I mean, it was the early 90s, so man buns were like huge.
Is this the same? I want to make sure I got my film credits right here. Uh-huh. Is this the same waterfall as in Medicine Man?
I don't know. I've never seen Medicine Man.
Waterfall played by the Waterfall.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, anyway, check out Medicine Man sometime.
Is that a Sean Connery movie?
It is.
Oh, okay. Yes.
No.
And, so much like Braveheart, Kevin Costner is too old to be playing the character of Robin Hood. Yeah. This should be a young man going through this. Like the beginning of the movie when Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman does a good job in this movie. I've got no problem with him. And but like him and Morgan Freeman are returning to England, and Kevin Costner is almost like a teenager with his Oh, you did it to save a woman, huh? Tell me about this woman. Tell me about her. Tell me about her. And I have more of an accent than Kevin Costner did.
I was going to say, I heard some accents sneak in there.
I had more of an accent than Kevin Costner did. And Morgan Freeman's like, yeah, it was worth she was worth it. And he's like, I thought so. And then off they go onto their next adventure. And it's funny that you mentioned the Lost Boys, because one of the bad guys in this movie, if I can try and find his name here in the list, and I can't. Oh, wait, Michael Wincott, guy of Gisborne?
The guy with the scratchy voice?
Yeah, Mr. Gravelly voice. He's in Lost Boys, isn't he?
No.
He's not? Oh, he's in The Crow. I looked it up before. He's in The Crow.
There you go. Yeah, he's a bad guy in The Crow.
Yeah. So Kevin Costner fights that guy, and the guy's like...
Okay. I don't know if his voice is quite that scratchy.
That's how he sounds when he talks.
Isn't he cousins with the Sheriff of Nottingham?
Yes.
Or Prince Nottingham? Wait, what is Alan Rickman again in this movie?
He's the sheriff. He's the Sheriff of Nottingham, and his grand scheme, in with the evil witch that lives in his castle,
right?
Who is played by Geraldine McEwen, who's a beautiful, beautiful woman. She plays Mortiana, and she's like the witch, and she's like a antichrist or something. She's got inverted crosses and stuff, and witchcraft. And their plan is for him to become King of England by marrying Maid Marian. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It's a stupid plan. But yeah, so that's Alan Rickman's goal, is to become King of England before Prince or King Richard returns from the Crusades, if he does return. So there's your plot. It's really bad. It's really hard to watch. I don't know if of course you remember the Bryan Adams song from the movie.
I think Bryan Adams is practically one of the stars of this movie.
Yeah. Like the theme from that song is played so heavily over the music that's used in the movie, like not with the words, but like an orchestral version of oh god, I can't remember the song. It's been stuck in my head all week.
Everything I Do.
Yes. Look into your eyes, you see.
All right, let's move on.
But like an orchestral version of that song. Constantly. Yeah. And like you said last week, this movie is 4 years before Braveheart came out, and the action sequences look so stilted, they look so boring. Like the action is so bland. And this was like a huge Warner Brothers movie too. Like this was a huge movie when it came out. Mm-hmm. And it's just so blah.
Now, let me ask you a question here.
Yeah.
I agree with you in terms of that. That is true. That is a spot-on description of this movie. You grew up having seen this before, right?
Oh, yeah.
What was your relationship with this movie when you were younger?
I remember liking it when I was younger. I think it's just because there's a lot of action. And my wife mentioned, and I know this from listening to the Star Wars Minute podcast, but the like there was toys and stuff for this movie.
Really?
Yeah, like lots of toys. And one of the toys was like the tree house that all the Lost Boys live in.
Yeah.
And from the Star Wars Minute podcast, I learned that after Return of the Jedi came out, they made way too many toys for Return of the Jedi that never got sold. And so like the Ewok villages got the ones that didn't sell were repurposed as Prince of Thieves treehouse.
Those were sitting around for years.
Yeah, for years. And then they were sitting around for years again because I don't think anyone bought Robin Hood Prince of Thieves toys. Not.
Good God. But I will say, I remember loving this movie and watching it numerous times as a kid.
Uh-huh.
And then I tried watching it about, I don't know, maybe 9 years ago with my girlfriend at the time. And good Lord, like 25 minutes in, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm putting you through this. We're turning it off. And she was like, thank God. I was like, yeah, this is terrible. This is the most horribly boring experience ever.
Yeah, it's so bad. I said the same thing to my wife because she didn't want to watch this at all. And I'm like, come on, let's put ourselves through some pain. And about 20 minutes in, I was like, I'm sorry. And she's like, you should be. I told you I didn't want to watch this.
And then you looked at her and said, there's another hour and a half.
This movie is almost 2.5 hours long.
Oh, good God.
Yeah. It's 2 hours, 23 minutes.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Christ.
it's really bad. It's like you don't even you can't even figure out like what they were trying to do. But as I said, Alan Rickman is terrific. He chews the scenery in every scene he's in. He has the most boring death. Spoiler alert, Alan Rickman dies at the end of the movie. And the way he dies is so anticlimactic. So him and Robin Hood are having their big sword fight in front of Maid Marian. And, you know, they're going back and forth. And for some reason, Sheriff Nottingham is a great swordsman now. And they have this fight. And then Robin Hood gets disarmed. And Sheriff John looks back at Maid Marian. He's like, I'll be with you in a minute. Because he's trying to rape her in order to get her pregnant. Because that's how that works.
Yeah, because according to the witch lady, she's ripe.
Yeah, it is gross.
Remember that crap.
And so while he like turns to look at Maid Marian, Robin Hood pulls out this little dagger and stabs the Sheriff John right in the heart. And that's the end of the movie. He's like gets stabbed in the heart, and then he takes like 3 minutes of stumbling around with like blood coming out of his mouth before he dies. They put together this plan at the end of the movie to rescue all of like the lost boys because they're all going to be hung in the town square. And there's like 10 of them, including a child, that are all going to be hung. And they find out about it because Christian Slater, who plays Will Scarlet, comes back and he's like, hey,
Robin Hood's brother.
Hey, Robin Hood. First off, I'm your long lost brother. Number two, I was sent here to assassinate you. I'm probably not going to do that. And three, here's what's going on at the castle. Let's put together a plan so we can rescue these guys. So they put together a plan, and it all revolves around Robin Hood being able to shoot an arrow through a rope to like free them from being hung. Like he's going to cut the noose with an arrow. But while the prisoners are being marched, all right, so here's let's take a step back. So the people love Robin Hood because he robs from the rich and gives to the poor. So the people love him. They love him and his merry men. That's the word, merry men, not lost boys.
We'll stick with lost boys. It sounds better.
And so, like, everyone loves them. So, like, the day that they're all being marched out to be executed, the people are throwing food at them like they hate them. Like, it looks like the scene from Braveheart where Mel Gibson's being taken to the torture spot where they're going to execute him, and people are throwing food at him. But it makes sense because those are, like, English people, and he's from Scotland. Whereas in Robin Hood, the people they're having like food thrown at them, they're being booed and all that stuff. But these are the people that supposedly love these people. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like why are these people booing? Anyway, doesn't make any sense. So anyway, while they're marching towards the executioner zone, Christian Slater gets into the face of this kid who's going to be executed, and the kid thinks that Christian Slater has betrayed everyone, but he hasn't. So Christian Slater gets in the face of this kid. He's like, "Hey, it's me, Will Scarlet. What are you doing? What's going on?" And the kid's like, "Hey, that's Will Scarlet. That's him. That's him. That's him. He betrayed us. He betrayed us." And like the whole plan goes right out the window, and you're like, what was Christian Slater thinking? Like, what was the plan here? And so then Robin Hood and and Morgan Freeman, who's invented gunpowder, start blowing up the castle that they're all in, and it just leads to the climactic fight between Robin Hood and Sheriff John. But what a bad movie. So bad. The end.
Yeah.
That's really all I got to say about it. Like, check it out.
Don't. Yeah, Nick told me to watch it so we could talk about it together, and I refused.
Yeah.
So I'm not putting myself through that.
Yeah.
All right.
Well then.
Well, what's up next then?
Shall we do your Harry Potter corner?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or did you want to save that for later?
No. Let's throw it in now and spice things up with some. I was going to say non-movie stuff. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, so a couple episodes back, we had raised some questions about different about Horcruxes and about Arthur Weasley. So I'll start there. So I checked in with my friend Heather, who is the leading expert, or at least our expert on Harry Potter.
Uh-huh.
Now, we had a little bit of a discussion about the jokes around Arthur Weasley, and for those of you who don't know, that's Harry Potter's best friend's father, also a wizard, and the jokes about him and muggles. And so here's the official feedback.
Okay.
Arthur Weasley is a competent muggle expert. He should be respected and appreciated as someone with wizarding abilities who's interested in this other culture, the non-wizards. But he's still very disconnected from what they actually are, and it's not an illustration of how bad of a muggle expert he is. It's a demonstration or a presentation of how disconnected wizards are and how confused they are and potentially disinterested in a way by muggles. So much so that even the expert is kind of, his knowledge is pretty bleak and limited.
Uh-huh.
So it's the joke isn't so much about Arthur Weasley as it is a joke about wizards in general.
Okay.
He sort of personifies the culture shock between wizards and muggles.
All right.
Yeah. And we in our discussion, it's like, okay, keep telling me stuff. She kind of explained that, like, even though there are some wizards who are born to muggles, you wouldn't really see any of them be muggle experts because there's just not much reason for them to be interested in muggles. They already were growing up around muggles, and then they got to find out they were wizards. And if you found out that you were a wizard, would you be like, oh, cool, I'm a wizard. Let me sit down and study being a muggle. Right. Although I will acknowledge that Hermione does consider taking muggle studies, to which Ron, Mr. Weasley's son, says, why the fuck would you study muggles? You grew up with muggles.
Well, she's a mudblood, right? It's an easy credit for her.
Yeah. So let's see.
Isn't mudblood a slur?
Oh yeah, that's a word that if these were real things, only people on Reddit would use.
Mudblood.
Well, and Heather made a good point about this, mostly illustrated in the books, not really the movies, but like in the fourth story at the Quidditch World Cup at the beginning of the book or movie, there's a degree of demonstration that Mr. Weasley's more competent than the other wizards because they have to disguise themselves as muggles. And even while he might look like his outfit might be a little strange, like he knows what to put on in a general sense, whereas other people are wearing like tarps and some guys walking around in like a lady's bathrobe, and I mean it's just like stuff that would stand out a bit more. All right, now Clearly I was dictating this because I'm looking at my notes and it says, use magic so we should have more understanding FaceTime.
I can always tell when you're texting me and you're using the dictation thing because it doesn't make any sense.
Oh, good Lord. It's the worst when I'm sending you a message.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find the one from the other day where I was like, I don't know what you said.
So we're taking a left turn from Harry Potter corner over to autocorrect corner. There is another Harry Potter thing here, but
here.
I'll wait till you. There you go.
Here it is. This is from Saturday. I saw Bumblebee last night. I wouldn't give it an essay or anything, but the first 4 minutes are worth whatever you might pay to see it.
That sounds
and then
pretty decent.
When I said, what, you replied, saw Bumblebee, not an A, but the first few minutes are worth the ticket price. Then you're like, then you can look back and you're like, oh, I can see what you're trying to say there.
That was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you were to scroll back further, there was one I sent you at some point. And you were like, what does that mean? And I was like, that I'm going to have to think about for a while. Okay, so question 2. And this blew my mind. Okay, so about the Horcruxes. Because we've been talking about the Chamber of Secrets and how the diary at the end of Chamber of Secrets is a Horcrux. And Heather, she explained that she had thought about Horcruxes similarly to how I had. And it was as though what Voldemort did was stick part of himself in an object so that part of himself, if he were to die, could like spring to life and be him. And no, we have it all wrong.
That's not what was going on.
That's not how it works. So think about it this way instead. If there's a Horcrux in the world, then if Mort is killed, his spirit can stay in the world. It doesn't go to Horcrux. Horcrux is just something that allows him to continue existing. So it kind of answers two questions at the same time, which is why he's not popping out of these things all over the place, and why he is able to the back of people's heads and stuff like that. Because there are Horcruxes in existence, his spirit is to just stay float around.
Okay. So you were breaking up a little bit there, and I think every time it broke up was when you would say an important word.
Okay.
So I caught about half of that, I think.
All right. So Horcruxes they're kind of like not lightning rods, because that's towards him. They just allow him to continue existing. So if the Horcrux,
Jesus Christ, why don't you give me a call back in a second? Call me right back. All right.
Yep.
Hanging up. Well, listeners, it's just you and me for the next few seconds while we wait for Midwest Matt to give us the old telephone call back. Yes, we're waiting patiently for the phone to ring, and I will tease you with it. Oh, there it is! Christ. That was loud. Hello?
I hope you'll edit this out later so people don't have to listen to me terribly explain Horcruxes 8 times. Or like 8 partial times.
Right.
Okay. So, here's how Horcruxes work. They aren't something that Voldemort, if he dies, like his spirit shoots into. And they're not another part of him that just pops up into life once he's dead. They are just they are parts of his soul, but all they do is keep his spirit in this world. So that if his spirit can linger around until he reestablishes a body.
Okay. It doesn't really clear anything up.
Well, no, it does because they aren't supposed to do much on their own. Still a little strange that the diary does what it does in the second one, but it's a little bit like it's sort of a special Horcrux because it's got a bunch of memory stuff put into it. But all the rest of them are things like cups and Yara and like less like kind of more static objects in a way, except for the snake. So I don't know about the maybe could be doing. That's the end of Harry Potter Corner, I guess.
Okay. If you would like to sponsor Harry Potter Corner, check us out on Patreon.
You know what? Maybe we should just let Harry Potter Corner be free for now. Oh, Lord.
Right. So that's Harry Potter Corner for this week. Matt, you watched a movie.
Are you still recording?
Yep, haven't stopped.
Okay, so you're gonna just chop out like a nice half hour.
There's a good 3-minute period where there was no sound. Like the first time you called me back, I narrated through it, and I've given up on that.
Oh man, you can just put bloopers at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Matt,
this week I saw Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh.
All right. So, Jesus fucking criminy. Okay. All right.
Again,
so, Nick.
Listeners, this is the third time I think I've had to explain this. We've been having a slew of technical issues putting this episode together this week where large chunks of the episode have been lost to time because of bad audio quality.
Originally, there were lots of corners. Now it's just a sphere. All right. So Nick, I watched Fellowship of the Ring.
Uh-huh.
It's the first of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies.
Oh.
Yeah. So in this movie, this hobbit, which is a small human with hairy feet, has to take a ring that's extremely powerful and controls all these other rings of power to a volcano where he can throw it in and destroy it.
Because a wizard told him to.
Right. A wizard named Gandalf, played by Ian McKellen, told him to. And, this movie, I had some things written down, but I deleted them as I was saying them. You've got 4 hobbits, 2 humans, a wizard, a dwarf, and Superman.
Right.
Oh wait, I mean an elf.
Oh right, okay.
And that's just that my little joke about how this movie's got one character who's way too overpowered. Because this elf can do anything, and really to the degree that when certain things happen, you're like, wait a minute, the elf could have done something there. And the wizards too. Like I noticed that the wizard power is used pretty sparsely. But I don't know, maybe it's like Dungeons and Dragons and Gandalf wakes up and gives himself 2 spells to use that day. I don't know. But I like this movie a lot. It's my favorite of the 3. I feel like it's the most dynamic because you're setting things up and you're going from a very quaint setting to a very large, epic setting, or list of settings.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows for there to be what I was talking about in our last discussion when I was talking about, I think, Indiana Jones, a sense of wonder. This is probably one of in more recent years, although I guess this movie is, 17 years old now?
Yeah.
This is a movie that does have a lot of wonder, a lot of spectacle. As I mentioned before during the crisis of connection, there's it's a mixed bag. There are a lot of things where, like, with the special effects, some of the designs and effects are really, really great. And then there are some that just look kind of like Microsoft Paint. Mm-hmm. They don't look that bad, but they look bad in comparison to other stuff. So, like, if you see some of the scenes where, Frodo puts on the ring and you're seeing this kind of, I don't know, it just looks like a music video effect, like something out of Black Holes. And it goes from this kind of janky effect to, like, later you see what's this giant fire monster called a Balrog, and that's just the best looking thing ever. Mm-hmm. If you're not sure about these movies and you're going to give Fellowship of the Ring a try, I'd say the 3 hours if you're watching the theatrical cut on Netflix, or the 4 hours if you're watching the extended edition. Even if you don't love the movie, it's worth it just to see this Balrog. It's such a cool moment.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned before that there's a pretty good mix in this movie of different tones. There's this, like, kind of fun, lighthearted adventure, but there are also moments where there's some pretty good horror stuff going on.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed this time around is how good of a job they do with reaction shots from different characters. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple things that happen throughout the movie. Spoiler alert. For instance, when Gandalf dies, where you see how... Don't worry, he comes back. Where you see how the different characters are responding, and it really gives you a sense of, like, oh yeah, they would all have kind of different reactions to this. You can see they're all sad, but they're processing things in different ways. And then when they meet Galadriel, played by Cate Blanchett, they all... I really noticed this time, how differently they react to her, just kind of with their facial expressions. Uh-huh. And it's really good. Although, I gotta say, oh yeah, and I mentioned this before, there's a pony in this movie that... I'm not sure when this pony shows up.
Isn't the pony's name Bill?
It is. It's Bill the pony. And it seems like it's Sam's pony.
Uh-huh.
But, like, there's a whole beginning of the movie where they're running around and they do not have a pony with them. They certainly don't have a pony with them jumping onto the wooden ferry that they take to get away from the ring wraiths on the horses. But then later they have a pony. And it's about 3/4 of the way into the movie, and Aragorn tells Sam he's got to let Bill the pony find his way home. And you're like, hey, that's sad and sweet. But where the hell did that thing come from? When did they get that?
I feel like they got it in the town, but I might be remembering the book.
Yeah, I'm sure. I want to say in the book they have it the whole time. I think it's just Sam's pony. But anyway, it's just kind of strange. Uh-huh. So if you're watching this...
Did you watch the theatrical version or the extended version?
I have watched the extended version a lot of times, uh-huh. And I will say that what I saw this time was the theatrical version, because that's what's on Netflix, and I was watching it at the gym. But in spite of the fact that even this version is 3 hours long, uh-huh. It does feel a bit like it feels a bit choppy, like where there are things where you're like, oh, that seems like it wasn't quite paced out. So if you're trying to choose one, I'd say go for the extended cut, but do understand that it is like 3.5 or 4 hours long.
Yeah,
this is the theatrical cut. It's shorter, and it was still 3 hours.
Yeah, they're epics.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing about this that I really like. These movies are epic, but they don't take themselves too seriously. Mm-hmm. At least not this one. I think the third one takes itself pretty seriously. But Fellowship of the Ring, it is huge, but it doesn't get pretentious. And yeah, I think that's about all I got to say. Actually, the end of this movie is stupid. And it really kind of hit me this time around, too, where I'm like, wait a minute. Frodo decides to go off on his own, even though only like 40 minutes before that, well, maybe like an hour before that. They just got put together as the Fellowship of the Ring. Insert disc 2. Because that's where that falls in the 2-disc set. But it's this big thing where it's like, yes, we finally put together this group who's going to take the ring to the volcano. And then Frodo's like, yeah, I'm going to go off on my own now. And it makes a little bit of sense from a conversation that he had with Galadriel, again, played by Cate Blanchett. I'm not sure which version of this recording I mentioned that. He wants to go off on his own. But then the other members of the party are like, they're like, we're going to let him go alone? And Aragorn says, yeah. And they're like, oh, all right. And they're like, wait a minute. If I were just put on a team whose mission was to save the world by getting this ring to a volcano, and I were to see that he's like jumped to the other side of a river and getting ready to leave, I'd be chasing after him. I wouldn't just go, oh, we're letting him go? Okay. I'd be like, no, the fate of the world rests on our shoulders. Let's follow. Maybe we can hang back 20 feet or so and make him more comfortable. But I'm not going to have him going on his own.
Isn't when he runs off, isn't it like right after Boromir tries to take the ring from him before the orcs show up?
Yeah. And that's the conversation that he has with Galadriel, because she's like, he's going to try to take the ring. And she explains to Frodo that it's going to destroy them one by one.
So he needs to leave because otherwise they'll all betray him.
That's his motivation, I think. But Legolas and Gimli don't know that. And Gimli's a stubborn-ass dwarf. And Legolas has been, since the moment he showed up on screen, immediately dedicated. So it just doesn't make sense that they go, oh, okay, we won't follow him then. Like, Aragorn doesn't even explain. He doesn't say, yeah, Frodo needs to do the rest of this mission on his own, to which I think they would still protest. He's just like, yep, we're letting him go. Now let's go kill some orcs.
Let us hunt some orc.
Yeah. That's the dwarf. Anyway, so I still love this movie, but I was like, this is kind of dumb.
I tried watching that with my son probably a month ago.
Oh, Lord, that's too scary for him, right?
Well, the beginning's not. The beginning's real nice and friendly when they're in the Shire and all. And right around the time when Merry and Pippin run into Frodo and Sam when they start the journey and they fall down the hill and
and the ring wraith shows up.
Well, Merry hits the bottom of the hill and he's like, oh, I think I broke something. And he pulls out a carrot that's like broken in half.
Yeah.
My son thought that was the funniest joke he's ever heard. He's like, he thought he broke his leg, but he broke a carrot. And I'm like, yep.
And then there's a real dark turn. 3 seconds.
And then the ring wraith shows up with the bloody horse. And luckily right then was when it was time for dinner. And so we had to turn it off. But I was like, oh, he was really into this movie up until just now. So we turned it off. And then that's when I tried to, I think I told you I was trying to read to him the book, the Lord of the Rings book. And he didn't like that. And then for Christmas, Santa brought him The Hobbit, an illustrated Hobbit book.
Yeah.
To try and do, and he doesn't care. We tried reading the first 5 pages of The Hobbit, and he was like, "This is boring, Daddy."
Yeah.
And he's too young. He's too young for it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same because The Hobbit is, I think, my favorite of all the books.
Oh, really?
Although the Silmarillion's a pretty interesting read. It's a weird book, but it's worth checking out.
I haven't read that one.
But I definitely like the Lord of the Rings movies better than the Hobbit movies. Those things suck.
Have you seen all 3 of the Hobbit movies?
Yeah, unfortunately, and I wish I could get my 11 hours back.
Yeah, I've only seen the first 2, and I really don't want to watch the third one.
Don't waste your time.
I'm sure on YouTube there's a 90-minute version of the 3 movies that's probably pretty good.
It's probably better than any of the movies on there. Yeah. So that was a Fellowship of the Ring.
All right.
I highly recommend it.
That only took us 45 minutes to get through.
Yay.
All right. That brings me to my second movie that I saw this week called just Outlaw King. It's from 2018. It's on Netflix. Directed by David Mackenzie. It was really good. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. It stars Chris Pine, and he plays Robert the Bruce. And that's really the only actor of note in this movie. There's like a couple of people where you're like, I recognize this person, but like you don't know who they are. Like I'm trying to look at these names and I don't recognize any of these names except for Chris Pine. And Chris Pine plays Robert the Bruce. Like I said, he gets crowned King of Scotland. And then it's the story of him trying to lead a revolt to free Scotland from English rule. It's pretty funny, I guess, that I found this movie just like a few days after watching Braveheart. Because Braveheart takes place, the events in Braveheart take place right before the events of this movie start. It's pretty interesting, and the beginning of this movie says that all of these events are based on historical events. Like everything in this movie is based on something that really happened, and Braveheart is not. Like Braveheart is like here's something that happened, but we're taking a lot of historical liberties.
A lot of liberties.
Yeah. To tell a story. So like going straight from Braveheart to this movie is a little jarring because of everything that happens in Braveheart is not reflected in what happens in this movie. Like for instance, the King of England is still alive in this movie and his son isn't like a weakling or gay. I guess he could be gay, but they don't talk about it at all.
It's not part of the story.
Yeah, it's not part of the story. In fact, the son of the king is like kind of a loose cannon, almost a lunatic, which is quite a different character than the son of the king in Braveheart. So you kind of have to take both movies with a grain of salt and just kind of think of it as like a spiritual sequel, just kind of continuing the story. But in that. If you remember what I was saying about watching Braveheart, there's some pretty epic battle sequences in this movie, and in Braveheart there are, like I was saying, in Braveheart is like the last movie that they had epic battle sequences without a lot of CGI.
Yeah,
and this movie has a lot of CGI battle sequences, and it's like a lot of horses like being attacked, or like like a cavalry riding in.
Yeah,
and it really does. The lack of like that lack of realism really does distract from the weight of the scene you're watching. Like there's like a whole wave of horses coming at you, but only like 4 or 5 of them are real. You know what I mean? And then like the horses get attacked, and the violence in Braveheart I think is better done, but there's this movie does a really good job of showing like the fog of war, where like they're fighting in these muddy bogs, and you're like, how does anyone know who to attack? Like there must have been just back in those times just so much friendly fire as far as like you're just attacking the next person you see. Like, cause I just can't understand how they would be able to
identify people.
Yeah, how can you tell friend from foe? They look exactly the same as you.
Unless you've gotten to know every comrade you've got in your army.
Right. Yeah, and I know colors were important back then, like the colors that you wore which signified the team you were on. But like these soldiers were all wearing, like everyone was just dressed in gray chainmail. And
and once you're covered in mud and stuff too.
Yeah, exact mud and blood. But that being said, those are just questions I think I have for history. My son is yelling through I don't know if you can hear that, but he's yelling through the air conditioning duct. So
excellent.
There's that. Now we have that to contend with. Anyway, Outlaw King it's a good movie. It was a fun watch. Really violent, pretty interesting from a historical standpoint, because it does make a point of saying this is based on historical events at the beginning. So you have to I just assume that that's true. I didn't do any research on my own.
Does it feel more like legitimate history? like than Braveheart. You know, because Braveheart, I know there was a lot of talk about it being like, this is based on a true story, but like as you're watching it, you can feel it's sort of corny and stuff. Does this have does it feel more like you're watching something that's probably historically honest?
Yeah. Actually, the first 10 minutes or so of the movie are one long continuous Steadicam shot of where Chris Pine like takes the knee in front of the King of England. And it basically shows like life in like these war camps, and like they're inside like the king's tent, and then we go out of the tent, and then we go back into the tent, and it just kind of shows very casually shows like the day-to-day life of what it seemed like to be back then, which is very interesting. And then like the scene ends behind the tent where the war is still raging, and they're launching like this trebuchet at this castle that hasn't surrendered yet. And my favorite line from the whole movie is like, but they've already surrendered. He's like, yeah, well, it took us 3 months to build this trebuchet, so we're going to use it. It's definitely worth checking out. I kind of highly recommend it. Outlaw King. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, Chris Pine does a great job. You get to see his dick, so there's that. It has an unnecessary nude sequence in it, where he's taking a bath in a little river, and he stands up and there's his junk.
You seem less excited about his junk than you were about Kevin Costner's butt.
I really wasn't expecting. See, I think I knew Kevin Costner's butt was in that movie. I didn't know I'd get to see Chris Pine's Captain Kirk. Well,
congratulations.
Yes. But he has a Scottish accent in this movie, and he doesn't have like a whole lot of lines. And a lot of the things he says is really quiet, and he's a reserved kind of character. But for a while, I forgot that Chris Pine isn't Scottish.
Oh, nice.
Like you know how so many actors these days are English or Irish, and they do an American accent. I forgot that Chris Pine is American, and he's doing a Scottish accent for this movie. So I was like, oh yeah, I kind of lost myself in his character there. That's really good.
Yeah, he's turning out to be an actual talented actor.
Yeah, I like Chris Pine a lot. But that's all right. That's really all I got to say about Outlaw King. It's cool. A good glimpse into 14th century world of Scotland.
That might be my next movie at the gym.
Yeah.
Although,
it's fun.
Hopefully there aren't any kids around when his wang pops up on screen. Yeah. I feel a little weird when I'm at the gym and there's nudity on my TV or on my phone or whatever. Like, I'm like,
there's like
a pervert right now.
There's a brief scene of female nudity in this movie too. And, you get to see Chris Pine's butt too. That's right. Forgot. And, yeah. So I've seen all of Chris Pine.
You say that something shows up on screen, you're like, you get to.
Yeah, you get to see it.
You get to see his dick. Yeah. You get to see his butt. Oh man.
All right, yeah. So Outlaw King, right. Total recommend. And this movie, and like we were saying about the IMDb ratings, this movie is a 7.0 on Netflix. 0.1 better than Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. So
does Rotten Tomatoes review Netflix movies?
I don't know. It has a Metacritic score of 59, which feels pretty low, I guess.
That sounds low.
Yeah.
Well, although if you're comparing that to the IMDb ratings, and the IMDb ratings are giving everything a freaking 7.
Yeah.
Then who knows?
Right.
Let's see here. I'm going to check out Rotten Tomatoes.
While you're doing that, I'll just drop some more knowledge. In the trivia for this movie, I read that the original cut for this movie was 4 hours long, Ooh. And it's just over 2 hours long, the final cut. And while I was watching it, I was like, man, I would have loved to have seen a 4-hour version of this. I feel like there's so much more story that they didn't get to address. And the movie at the end of the movie just ends, where it's like, oh, that's the end of the movie? It's over? Huh. It's pretty jarring the way that it ends. Also, if you remember the end of Braveheart, somebody does a voiceover at the end. I can't remember if it's Mel Gibson or not, but they talk about how after Braveheart is executed, they send his head to like somewhere and then his limbs to the four corners of Scotland as a warning. That's reflected in this movie. Like at one point, Chris Pine is in a town delivering the taxes from his county or whatever.
And William Wallace's head is there.
It's like his leg or something is like hanging off of like a town center. And I was like, oh man, that's a cool detail. And especially since I just watched Braveheart. I know I already said that, but like it's like a real sequel.
Yeah, I could see that being a cool element to have there.
Yeah.
Pretty dark, but, still gives it a little bit of that. Well, and maybe, even that if it is his leg and not his head, a little bit more it's less dramatic, so kind of more real.
It's that moment where the people are reacting to the limb being hung up, where the people are like, how could you do this? Where Chris Pine is like, oh, these people are still ready to fight. These people aren't totally defeated yet, and that leads him to starting another revolution. But Chris Pine's character, he is not a good guy. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a dark character. Like he does some pretty despicable things.
Okay.
Yeah,
so it's a little more realistic.
It's a little more realistic. The things that he does, like I don't want to spoil it, but like some of the things that he does is it's understandable, but you're like, wow, that was pretty unnecessary. But it's pretty unnecessary, but necessary, if that makes sense. When you see it, it'll make sense then.
Okay, I am going to check this out. It sounds pretty good.
More, I guess, instead of more unnecessary, it's more of a wow, that escalated quickly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My shock while you were talking was not actually about how long the movie is. But as I brought up Rotten Tomatoes, I saw that Glass has a 35%.
I'm not hearing good things about it.
Yeah, so my shock was, oh no, because I've already kind of dedicated myself to seeing it.
Yeah, me too.
Hopefully we can see that the same week, and we can review that together and not have to go through it twice.
Right.
Now, what's the name of the movie you were just talking about? Because I do want to see if it's reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes.
Outlaw King.
Outlaw King. Let's see here.
At one point, they get him this crown, and
it's got a 63% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's pretty good.
I think that's a decent score.
Yeah.
Although I think it's like a 63% too. Yeah. Everything from now on will be measured against Aquaman. Oh no, Aquaman got a 64%.
That's not possible.
Good grief.
Everyone that I've talked to about Aquaman has disliked the movie, and yet it just keeps making money.
Yeah,
it's made more money than Batman vs Superman and the Justice League.
Didn't make as much as Black Panther.
No, well, actually, I think it is approaching Black Panther money.
No,
I think it is.
No, because Black Panther made more than any of the other Marvel movies
domestically.
No, maybe that's... Oh, God. All right. So...
That brings us to your next movie.
Oh, that brings us to what happens before my next movie.
Oh, boy.
Preview Corner.
Brought to you by The Big Ticket.
Yeah, Big Ticket. I hope you feel like you're getting your money's worth here. So my first experience while in Preview Corner was pre-preview, Advertisement Corner.
Uh-huh.
That's a smaller corner.
Coke Corner.
No, nothing about Coke in this one. I mean, actually, it was. They did still do that one with the pepperoni pizza. And hey, I hope you're putting together a transformer over there.
Oh,
that's what it sounds like.
I'm playing with a utility knife.
All right.
I didn't think that was that loud.
Dude, I know it never shows up on this show, but it's like any little thing you do seems to come right through in the headset.
Everything you do for you.
I don't think that's how that works.
There's no love.
Okay, this show's going to be 8 hours long. Moving on. No Coke commercial. And actually, my question or complaint here is how people keep laughing at these M&M ads, which are just stupid.
Like the ones where the M&M's like, I can't believe you let your phone ring.
Yeah, or they're like, this is a mission. He's like, no, this is an envelope.
Uh-huh.
And people always laugh at those. And I just don't get it. I'm like, at this point, how are you finding this funny?
Uh-huh.
But this wasn't even an experience I had this time around because I was in the theater literally by myself. But when the commercial came on, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm almost expecting there to be someone laughing at this stupid thing because they always do. So anyway, previews. I saw a preview for a movie called Breakthrough. And there's a theme here because if you go see Vice, almost all the previews are like based on a true story movies, which makes some sense because Vice is a true story. Mm-hmm. So Breakthrough, PG movie. And this is why it's PG, for thematic content.
Okay.
So you better have a parent with you because there's themes. I don't really know how that works. But Topher Grace plays pastor or priest or some sort of religious guy who's friends with this family, and this kid drowns, and he's underwater for like 15 minutes, but then he lives. Again, this is based on a true story, so I guess this actually happened. And all I really got from the preview was that I wish the movie was called Drown Boy. I thought that would have been a better title, but it's Breakthrough. Enjoy.
Okay.
Next preview. Based on a true story, movie called Fighting with My Family, which has not Simon Pegg, but his chubby counterpart. What's his name?
Nick Frost.
Nick Frost. And he and his family are wrestling fans. It's also got Vince Vaughn and The Rock in it. And the two kids, brother and sister, I guess there's some sort of contest to be in the WWE. The sister makes it in, the brother doesn't. He's disappointed. Then supportive, and then I'm sure everybody's happy at the end, and that's it.
Uh-huh.
All right. Then there was a preview for a movie called Gloria Bell with Julianne Moore and John Turturro, and I think the point of this is that old people can love again. It looked kind of like Something's Gotta Give, but instead of Diane Keaton and Jack Nicholson, it's got Julianne Moore and John Turturro. I guess the focus of it's supposed to be a bit more on the female character. So maybe it's sort of a counterpart to Something's Gotta Give that way. Because I think Jack Nicholson's the main character there. I really liked Something's Gotta Give. This did not look good. I still love Julianne Moore, but, like we've said before, her movies are hit or miss. This looks like a miss to me.
Okay.
Then I saw a preview for a movie called Hotel Mumbai. That is about a hostage situation. Lots of hostages, I think, in the Taj Mahal. They keep calling it the Taj, so I would assume so. And it looks pretty good.
It's based on actual events. Like it's from that terrorist attack in Mumbai.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Ago.
All these are based on true stories.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if Gloria Bell is a real person or not, but this Hotel Mumbai actually looked pretty good. I'm interested. Then there's a movie called Where'd You Go, Bernadette? With Cate Blanchett. I don't know if this is based on a true story or not. Probably is. I think she fakes her own death because she just ditches her family. and the family's trying to figure out where this woman went. And then things kind of took a twist because there's all these based on real events and, kind of serious or, whatever. Those kinds of movies. And Godzilla too.
Yeah.
Lots of monsters.
Right.
Dunkin' Donuts product placement.
Uh-huh. I'm
excited to see Mothra and Hydra or whatever the three-headed thing is called. And then there was a preview for a movie called Us, which is another Jordan Peele movie.
Right. Yeah.
Got a lot of folks who worked on Get Out kind of working together again.
Yeah. I still need to see Get Out.
You haven't seen it yet?
No.
You do need to see Get Out. Get your ass on that.
Maybe we'll watch that tonight.
You should. And so this movie looks a bit like The Strangers meets what's that movie called? The Others. So it looks like kind of like a mashup of ideas from those. But based on Get Out, I would expect it to be better than either of those movies. Because that was a great movie. There is some stuff in Get Out that's not perfect. There's some kind of comedic, comic relief stuff that's a little out of place, but it's a good movie.
Okay.
All right. And then there was a
lot of previews.
This is the 8th one. This was not a normal preview, but this was one of those things where they have the people who worked on the movie talking about the movie. And it was another one for Alita Battle Angel. And it just looked like Robert Rodriguez and I don't know if it was Ridley Scott or who made Terminator 2?
James Cameron.
Or James Cameron. I think it's one of those guys. And boy, do they look like they are desperate. They're we put a lot of work into this movie, so please go see it.
The advance buzz about that movie is that it's pretty good.
Well, you would not know it from this because they just look disappointed.
Yeah.
They look sad to be there.
Yeah.
And that's the end of Preview Corner.
Brought to you by The Big Ticket.
Good job, Big Ticket. Vice. Okay. Movie about Dick Cheney, starring Christian Bale as Dick Cheney, Amy Adams as Lynn Cheney, Sam Rockwell as George W. Bush, Steve Carell as Donald Rumsfeld, and a bunch of other people as other people. Tyler Perry's in there as Colin Powell.
Tyler Perry plays Colin Powell?
That's what I said. Yep. And he does a good job. It does give you a little bit of I don't know what your opinions on Colin Powell are, but I had some respect for him then during the Bush years. Went, he's not as great as I thought. And this fills in a little bit of that. Here's what was going on, as long as it's accurate anyway. Here's what's going on behind the scenes with how he got kind of used. And this movie is I think a lot of people who worked on it were the same folks that worked on The Big Short. Obviously, it's got some of the same stars.
I never saw that.
Well, this has a very similar feel to that.
It's not that I didn't want to see it. I just never got around to it.
I watched The Big Short around the same time as I watched another reality movie, Spotlight.
Never saw that either.
Of the two of them, I'd say Spotlight's a lot better.
Spotlight's about the priests, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The child molestation and stuff. And The Big Short and Vice have a pretty similar feel. It's like a movie that's sort of meant to inform. And it does do a decent job of, how these days when you actually see George W. Bush, you go oh, I remember simpler times.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that those were horrible times also. This is kind of a decent reminder in a way of how we got to where we are now. And it's kind of hey, don't forget, this stuff didn't all just start. It's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
So it's good in that sense. And it does give you a pretty good sense of how Dick Cheney got to be so powerful. without people even really knowing him and knowing like who he is and like what he's about. And I even felt that way where I'm like, I paid a lot of attention during the Bush years, but never knew what Dick Cheney was actually doing and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And this does a pretty good job of laying that out. But as a movie, I would say it's not great. Just from an, I don't know, entertaining and engaging standpoint, like I never checked my phone during a movie. I checked my phone like 6 or 7 times during this movie, where I was like, yeah, I'm going to find out who this actor is, because right now I'm not that engaged in what's going on. I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but it definitely had some drawbacks. I can't necessarily recommend it easily.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really into, I would put it this way: if you liked The Big Short, you'll probably like this. There are some things both movies have where it gets creative here and there and does some interesting jokes. And there's sort of conceits as far as how things are being explained to you they're different from The Big Short, but they've got a similar feel to them. Like there's voiceover work in this one. There's a narrator. The Big Short kind of pauses here and there and goes like, here, I'm going to explain this to you right now with some diagrams and stuff.
Uh-huh. This
movie's a little bit more like the narrator's kind of walking along with the camera going like, by the way, here's how this happened. And so some of the story stuff, there's not exactly, other than to say like Dick Cheney's life, there's not exactly a completely cohesive thought or plot, but you do see a lot of how Lynn Cheney, his wife, actually kind of directed and pushed Dick Cheney to be what he became.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting to see how he kind of becomes, he kind of starts out as a lackey to Rumsfeld once he gets into politics. And then by the end of the movie, it's like, he's got the power above Rumsfeld. And there are some things in the movie where, as much as it's explaining some things maybe more than it needs to, there are moments where it kind of yada yadas over stuff. And you're like, well, wait a minute. How did we get from him being at this rung of the ladder to this rung of the ladder? Overall, you get the story, but there are some spots where it's like, oh, I would have been interested to find out what was between plot point C and D. And there are some jokes that are pretty funny. There's a pretty... I kind of think the best way to explain this without spoiling anything is a pretty hilarious moment where you get a little bit of alternate history, and it's practically laugh out loud funny. But the pace of the movie overall is pretty slow. So if I had to give it like a letter grade, I'd say it's like a B-.
Okay.
And I'll leave it at that. Yeah. No, actually, you know what? No, I won't. I will say about Christian Bale, I know a lot of people make a big deal out of him losing and gaining weight, and I'm sure that's done fucking craziness to his body. But as far as him becoming Dick Cheney, it takes a little while. Like for most of the movie, or like the first half of the movie, I was like, man, I feel like I am watching Christian Bale try to be a fat guy. But then by the end of the movie, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was Christian Bale in there. So I credit to him. Amy Adams, I think, is pretty good in it. But I feel like if anyone gets nominated for anything in this movie, it might be a bit of like, just liking to see people not look how they normally do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. When people gain a lot of weight, or you take Charlize Theron and make her look ugly, although she was really good in Monster. There might be a bit of that. I don't think there are any performances in this movie that are actually super stellar.
Oh, okay. Because I've heard that the movie is lacking, but the performances are the draw.
They're good. I think I'd leave it at that. They're good. I expect them to be drummed up a bit better than they are, just because everyone looks so different, but they're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd like to see it.
I would say watch The Big Short first.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's it.
All right, great. Well, that brings us to the hottest new segment on the show, the great movie ranking list. Matt.
Yeah.
Where will you put, what was the first movie you talked about? Fellowship of the Ring.
I am going to put Fellowship of the Ring below Raiders of the Lost Ark and above Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So wow. Fellowship of the Ring goes in my number 3 slot.
Number 3 spot. LOTR. No, don't autocorrect it to lots.
Lots of rings.
Fellowship of the Ring. And this is week 99. Oh, that brings to mind. Next week is our big 100th episode. Although technically last week was our 100th episode. Next week is week 100. I know it's confusing.
Wait, did last week's episode go up?
Nope, it goes up later today.
Wait, so are these both going up on the same day?
Nope, this one goes out next week.
What?
Yeah, we're all screwed up.
All right.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so we're a week ahead of the world. Now, where would you put Vice?
Vice is going to go, I think it's going to be my number 9 slot. It's going to go between Life After Beth and Grabbers.
The new number 9.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably a better movie than some of the ones above it. In terms of enjoyment, I got to say, it's got to go a little lower.
All right. Vice in the number 9 spot, week 99. All right. Great. Then I'll open up my list. And I talked about Prince of Thieves, which, oh God. Is it better or worse than Aquaman? I gotta say
they were both boring.
I gotta say it's worse than Aquaman.
Really?
Yeah. Just the acting alone. I'm putting Prince of Thieves in the 20 spot between Aquaman and Mrs. Claus.
Wow.
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. That's how you spell thieves. Week 99. All right, and then the other movie I watched was Outlaw King, and I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna put that above. Well, let's see. I'm gonna put that above Teen Titans Go to the Movies, and between it and Popstar in the new number 11th spot. Outlaw King, week 99. And if you're interested in seeing our movie list, you can check it out on Instagram. I take like a screenshot of this spreadsheet and I put it up there. Although I don't know what we're going to do once it gets too long to fit on one screen. So we'll figure that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But Matt, the show is super long today because of all our technical issues. I don't know how long the final product will be. Anything to plug?
No.
I also have nothing to plug. So if that's the end of the reel, we'll see you next week in film.
See ya.